convening our September 21st, 2021 hearing of the House Investigative Committee to investigate compliance with audit numbers 19-12 and 21-01. We are doing and conducting this hearing via video conference and at the State Capitol in conference room 325 this morning. My name is Della Belatti, and I am the chair of this House Investigative Committee. Members, welcome. Thank you. This is our second day of hearings vis-a-vis the audit number 21-01 regarding the ADC. Today we have testifiers, representatives from the ADC, Mr. James J. Nakatani, Executive Director of the ADC, Ms. Myra M. Kaiichi, Senior Executive Assistant of ADC, and Ken Nakamoto, Project Manager with ADC. I believe you have counsel present. Counsel, if you could make your appearances.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. This is Jody Yee and Delaney Prescott-Tate from the Department of the Attorney General.
Thank you, Ms. Yee and Ms. Prescott, for being here. As a reminder, this is a Chapter 21 proceeding. You are here under via subpoena, and you will be testifying under oath. Testifiers, are you ready to take the oath? If you could please stand and raise your right hand. Mr. Jimmy Nakatani, Ms. Myra Kaiichi, Mr. Ken Nakamoto, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please note for the record that they have sworn. So members, we're going to have ADC begin their presentations, and like the former presentations, we are giving them approximately 45 minutes to an hour. Members, the representatives from ADC did provide us with 2 videos that we will also make available online. They were 15-minute videos and I believe another 10-minute video of the various lands. I have allowed them to show perhaps 2 minutes of that video just to provide a little context as part of the presentation. And then what we'll do is we'll take a break after their presentation and resume with our questions. So let's begin. Mr. Nakatani, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Belatti and Vice Chair Ichiyama and Representative Mark Asham for being here. I just want to give you our presentation. State Agribusiness Corporation Investigative Committee, and we should start. And okay, I can read it from here, but ADC's, I just want to read ADC's mission. ADC's mission is to acquire and manage in partnership, that's the key word for us, in partnership with farmers, ranchers, and aquaculture groups, selected arable lands, water systems, infrastructure for, again, commercial, agriculture uses, and to direct research to areas that will lead to development of a new crops, markets, and lower production costs. And this is just a mission statement that we just passed, the board passed, that I guess the auditor was critical about.
Mr. Nakatani, I'm sorry, if you want to completely remove your mask, that's kind of muffling you a little bit, and please talk directly into the microphone.
Okay. Secondly, the ADC goals, I think that was something that was the auditor said that we didn't have. I think that ADC goals to acquire, number 1, to acquire, develop productive agricultural lands for agricultural development. Goal number 2, to assure continued availability of adequate, reasonable price water to lands to accommodate present and future agricultural activities. And goal 3 was to improve the productivity of agricultural operations by providing bricks and mortar facility as needed, and promote the efficiency, profitability by enticing the development of applied research innovation on the state lands and state-owned facilities. And we had the objectives also, but we chose, was pretty lengthy. So, I mean, if the committee wanted it, we can submit that. Okay. And then the next slide is ADC staffing. And here you see we have 6 staff person regarding to ADC. The other 6 is related to Waihole water system, which is dedicated just to the system. I just want to point out that at the time of the audit, we were down to 4 people in the office. So just to give you an idea of how hard, it's been stressful, but we've been managed to do a lot of work, the amount of people that we had, Next slide shows you some of our holdings on throughout the state, and you have Central Oahu. You have Mokulia, Kalepa, which is on Kauai, Kikaha, which is on Kauai. And we're missing one slide, and that's in Hilo that we didn't put on. But I think if you look at the map, you can see that yellow, green dot on the screen there. Well, the next slide just shows you that the total acreage we have statewide, it's 22,000 acres, about 22,500 acres approximately. Tillable acreage is about 15,000 and current acreage occupied is about 10,000. And the percentage is 70% occupied. The next slide just gives you a pie chart of where the lands are and what the percentages are. And Central Wall, Mokulia, like I said, Kikaha, Kiao, which we have the Kalepa and as well as Kailua. This is a map of our holdings on Oahu, and it's basically 3,800 acres. Tillable is 3,200 approximately, and current acreage occupied is about 1,600, and percentage is 48%. We anticipate that pending is about over 1,000 acres. My pointer is not working on the TV, on the screen. But I just wanted to maybe show you where I can go up there.
Ms. Yee is there, so she can point to the area.
Okay, so the blue area is, that cross section. Okay, that's where, if you look at the drone and for the neighbor islands, that's where we saw. And moving to that, and that's part of it. And as you go downward, you're looking at Schofield. And if you go to the right, that's Wahiawa. And to the left, go all the way left, the green spot, where it's green and yellow, that's toward Haleiwa. Okay. And then just to give you a perspective of where you're looking at for the neighbor island people that may not know where Galbraith is and everything. I also want to point out for the future is that I don't want to come back, but the upper green and yellow, that's part of our portfolio also, but go to the next green spot, that spot, green spot, and then down to another green, and then to the blue, the other blue, the elbow blue. Yeah, that one. And then the purple is what we're talking about, the 1,000 acres that we're looking at developing. So, I'm sorry, I apologize that we didn't really have a good map to show in perspective, but I just wanted to point out that that's what we're looking at so you can have an idea of where we are. Okay. Some of the Galbraith crops are currently grown is cabbage, bell peppers, tomatoes, cucumber, taro, eggplant, okra, papaya, citrus, avocado, banana, dragon fruit, watermelon, and green onions, and amazingly tea leaves. So, yeah. And that's the Galbraith crops. When we talk about that, is mainly in that hatch mark, that blue section, that triangle point. And this is some of the other crops that we grow. I just want to point out that, we've criticized that we take a long time to develop the lands. And I want to, just for the committee, that all lands are not created equal. When you talk about plantation lands, pineapple lands are somewhat problematic in developing because one, they didn't have intense irrigation as for like sugar. The other thing too is that pineapple lands have very acidic soil, and most crops would not do well in the Galbraith area. And so we took a lot of pain and effort to get that acidity back to neutral. So it's like 3.4 is acidic, and get it to neutral pH, we're talking about, to about 6.5, which is pretty ideal for any crop that grows. So that's kind of an explanation why it took so long, and we had to develop, water systems that that were compatible with small farming. You just don't do just one big, well and just pump the water up and everything else like that. So those are the kind of things that we struggled with at Galbraith. It was a great learning experience. So the next time we do it, we know exactly how to approach it. So just to give you a perspective of how difficult it was. Here you see the whole farms, and it has to do with, and they've been pretty successful. They did fairly well through the pandemic and again, pivoting the marketplace and everything else again. And this is a, if you can show the aerial footage of Galbert for 2 minutes. Yeah, stop it. Okay, so the next slide is just showing you some of our parcel. This is Mokulia, and this is a small farm, 18 acres, and it's located in right off Dillingham Airfield, and it's in the quarry. It's an aquaculture operation. I'm not sure whether we are, but we're planning to transfer that parcel to the Department of Agriculture, at their request. Here you see Mokulia farm crops. Unfortunately, that farm is not located in Mokulia, but in one of the slides, that we showed you, that kind of green and yellow portion that we had before. But these are mangoes, and it's in Pala area, we call it? Pala area, in White, just before Haleiwa and Wailua, yeah. And some other crops he has is lychee that's growing there, just to show you the diversity. Next slide is a non-crop, non-food crop. This is the Christmas tree farm in Helemono, in Whitmore Village at the end of Whitmore Ave. And it provides seasonal jobs. And he raised, like last year, like 5,000 trees and everything last year, and sold out very quickly. I think the significance of, I want to point out that what this does is, it had his economic benefit, but, if you look at that, this is like import replacement. So this is the first time successfully we have an import replacement of trees coming in. The other note that we're happy about is that we don't have to worry about invasive species coming into trees. So, and hopefully he grows more trees, and in the Waihewa area, that provides a lot of employment and a good thing for us, for Christmas trees. Next slide is Kikaha, and it's about 12,500 acres. Tillable is 7,500 acres. Currently, acreage occupied is about 4,000 acres, and percentage is 53%. I'm not sure if you want to see the Kikaha video. That's kind of lengthy. When you want, you can do 2 minutes.
What, 1 to 2 minutes?
Yeah. Okay, let me go through the Kikaha crops. And this is mangoes. And so this is by Wally Johnson. The left side is papayas. And and if you go to the next slide, please. And Wally's been pretty innovative lately. This is mango trees growing under the roof. So that's what they call protective covering. And I've seen it done in elsewhere, like in Japan and everything. But this is the first time I think somebody has taken try to do this on the roof and everything. And what it is that it's easier to there's some, you don't have the environment of diseases coming in. And then, usually when you get a nice flush of flowers and everything, here comes the wind and you lose half the crop and everything like that. So thanks, we'll see how well it comes on that. And yeah, and this is another crop that he grows melons. And this is kind of like what the Japanese people do, the crop. And I think maybe Representative Hashem, you've been in Japan, so you can see this, but I'm not sure. He was successful in growing it. I haven't gotten the feedback on what was the taste and everything else like that, but I think it's perfect for Kauai. And families like now, they don't want the huge watermelon. They want to kind of like that size they can take home. Next slide. And this is a very interesting concept. This is like growing kiss melons, and hopefully he'll be successful. I think he's successful in growing it. In the past, we've tried to grow melons on, the everplains and everything, and we haven't been successful in growing a really good crop, so we'll see. Hopefully, I think this person was supposed to send Myra some samples or something. I don't know. We haven't seen it and everything else like that, but go ahead. Next crop, next slide. Yeah.
And continue to foster and develop agricultural activities for the years and generations to come. We also maintain miles and miles of roadway, continuously come in and regrade the roads as part of our efforts.
All systems go. Okay, coming up. Yeah, straight ahead, 12 o'clock. Kind of a drop down into the canyon.
We inherited a system that has 2 hydroelectric plants, 2 major ditch systems, Koke, Kikaha ditch, 7 shafts, countless miles of drainage channels, roads, and electrical grids. These systems are over 100 years old.
Just gonna follow the ditch line down.
In 2007, the Kika Ag Association signed a license with the Agribusiness Development Corporation to manage, operate, and improve the infrastructure here in Kekaha. We are now in the
Just to give you a glimpse of how complex the operations are in Kekaha. And I just want to emphasize the partnership with the KAA, Kauai Agricultural Association. And really it's really sad, but that person, did you see in there, Landis Ignacio, was really I think sometimes put everything together because he grew up there, he knows the community, and unfortunately passed away. So, but anyway, that's something that we looked at, and we didn't have the partnership with that. That area would be, I think, in dire straits. And it does prevent, although people may have an issue with like seed corn and everything, they do provide a lot of economic development, jobs, and everything else like that. And most of all important, we haven't touched upon this, but they also man the ditches when there's flooding and everything. They take it upon themselves to open up the ditches so the town won't flood, even though it's not their responsibility. So I think that that's something that we should take our hats off to KAA for really helping the community. Next slide. Oh, okay, sorry. This is Kalepa. This is another parcel that was transferred to us from DLNR. And it's about 6,000 acres. Tillable acreage is 4,300. Currently occupied is about 4,000, which is 4,000 acres, which is 94% occupancy. And so and this is a slide where this is sweet potatoes, and mainly it's exported to the mainland. And you would wonder why. And I asked this question about sweet potatoes. You would think that, it's cheaper to grow it in California or someplace else like that, or Mexico. But the answer was that it doesn't taste the same, and that's why they have a market from Hawaii. And usually it's grown in, used to be grown a lot in Hilo, and now they're trying to branch out to maybe Maui and Kauai and everything else like that. So export crop, you know. This is the Waihole water system, and it's manages and provides water to approximately 6,000 acres. Comes across the coalhouse from 27-mile long. The system is critical importance not only because of the impact of production of crops, but also of the economic impact on the community. And I found a brochure, and this was, I'm not sure how old the brochure was, but they did a study on that by HDOA, and the farm gate value of operation like this is like $95 million. So, it has a huge impact on agriculture community. Very important piece of infrastructure. And without water, I mean, it's not possible to grow crops, or highly unlikely anyway. Next slide. And this is community service for ADC projects. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. And what we did was, one of the projects was aiding Hawaii papaya farmers. And we had a little bit of money, and we gave some monies to HIC, in Kunia. And this is to cultivate seedlings for farmer on the Big Island. Significance of this is that trying to get the farmers back on track. And they did it from cutting, so it's kind of like I guess you could call it cloning, but every single papaya tree or plant is what they call hermaphrodite or self-pollinating. And that's what for commercial purposes, that's what you need in papaya. And usually what they do is to do a papaya, planting a papaya, you put 3 seeds in a hole, and you hope that one of the plants are, self-pollinating. So you don't really want the male, you don't want the female, but you want, the self-pollinating hermaphrodite, they call it, tree. Next slide. And so this is a picture of when it started. And the amazing part is that by using this technique, that you could have a crop in 7 months. This is papaya tree. So I think that this was a demonstration for the farmers to see that they can come back. They can do the production pretty quickly. I mean, expensive seedling, but I mean, production-wise, I think that's really something that we can help them with. Next slide. And this is a freckle-free papaya. And everybody says, what's a freckle-free papaya? When I was a deputy at the Department of Agriculture, we went to Japan and looked at the marketplace in Japan. Our papayas are outstanding, but aesthetically, they're very, very poor quality. A lot of freckles, spots, and everything. So the idea was to create a papaya that was aesthetically competitive with the other countries to go in places like Japan. And of course, try to make it even taste better. Food Hub, and we kind of refer that to the Food Innovation Center in Waihawa. And the idea behind that is that to make agriculture grow, in my opinion, or our opinion, is that you have to have value-added products. And a lot of times what you do is you take culls from like cucumbers or something, and you make something, a value-added product. And I think if we can accomplish that, that'll really help us, not only serve Hawaii, but, as an export product. Female RFP, that was just executed or awarded. And that has to do with taking fish waste and creating a fish food for local farmers here, Next time. And this is the Honu project that was we just completed. And this is, I'm not aware that everybody, are you familiar with the Honu project? And this was, to try to help the homeless people in the community. And I think the knee-jerk reaction every time somebody mentions homeless is that we don't want it in our backyard. But, I did witness, went down to K Lagoon witness of what they were doing, and I asked the lieutenant, so they did this in Waipao. And I asked them, though, how did this, go over in Waipao? And they said, fantastic. And, so I said, okay, so we really want to do our part to help the community because there's a lot of problems in, that Waihawa area with homelessness and everything. So this was a very, very successful program. Glad we did it. Yeah. And safety and security. We acknowledge that we, have been a lot of challenges, in particularly in Waihawa properties. This includes clearing of illegal activities, tilling the land, providing necessary irrigation improvements. But now that we've taken those major steps this past year, we can move forward with our goal of 100% occupancy of the land. And here you see a picture of removing 150 abandoned vehicles since last summer. Next slide. And this is we had this Wallow Circle in Whitmore. We had a lot of issues with people going into our property and out of the property and everything else like that. So kind of made it unsafe for the community. So we decided that we're going to fence this area and vast improvement. I mean, the community is much safer. People feel comfortable walking their animals, the dogs behind this area and everything. And, I think Ken and Lyle went out there, and it's a problematic area. I mean, I think that, but by putting the fence and securing the area, I think that it's much better now. Infrastructure. And this is a picture of the water for irrigation was a previous an issue. It has been since rectified. Repairs were made to the former bot well, Del Monte Foods well. It's called a bot well that provides much needed water for our irrigation. And this pump provides all of the water for the Galbert area. You see two new reservoirs recently completed. And this is a 10 million gallon reservoir. And next slide. And this is the 3 million gallon reservoir. That's so we have adequate water for the farmers in the future. Next slide. Next steps is to pivot to fill the vacant lands that we have and potential economic sorry impact of putting the lands back into production. Yeah. And just that said, that repeating myself, but this is 1,200 acres in central Oahu that the board will be selected 4 applicants, and our next meeting on the 29th, the board members will approve the acreages for the wild, that central Oahu area. Official announcement was put into spring of 2021 of interested farmers. And what we anticipated was because of pandemic and everything else like that, that no one would apply. But it's surprisingly that, given even the pandemic, that we had over 30 applicants for these lands and everything else like that. So hopefully by next summer, you see a lot of that put into production. Next slide. This is one of our more, I guess, how do I describe it? Major projects. And this has to do with taking, incorporating R1 water, which is the highest grade of recycled water, treated sewer water from the Waihawa wastewater treatment plant. And we're looking at 5 to 10 years to develop it. Study was done. EA went out, and August 3rd, 23rd was the deadline to submit testimonies to the EA. But I guess the significant part about this is that this would help save precious groundwater, and it provides irrigation for ADC, and and most of all, it'll improve the quality of water at Lake Wilson, and I think that's important because now it's okay, but what I'm saying is that you want the water to be, the lake to be much cleaner than that. So that's what we're working on right now. Okay, next steps. And this is to implement Central Oahu Watershed Management Plan and to rehabilitate existing Waihole water systems, which includes construction, reservoirs, backup well development, enclosing high-risk sections, improving the data gathering, and that our timeline is 1 to 5 years. Okay, next slide. Next steps, convert 1,000 acres productive diversified agricultural lands, which in development in the Kikaha area. And Waiaka Farms is 500 acres. That's a project of the Kikaha Agricultural Association. And what they say, and I think there's about 1 to 3 years they should develop that. This is a picture of Umi's farm in Kauai. And I think what this person, it doesn't show, but and we don't have a good picture of this, but what this person is trying to do is trellis mango trees, and trellis, like mango trees, which has never been done before in Hawaii. They do it in New Zealand, they do apple trees and everything else like that. So kind of looking forward to see this new technology coming on, trellising mango trees in the Kikaha area. And what it does is that, it's supposed to be more productive per square foot because you don't have the canopy, it goes straight up in the trellises, easier to control pest and disease and easier to harvest, This is Kalepa, and we're plans to convert 500 acres of productive diversified agriculture. Status is 1 to 3 years, and this is a picture of ginger growing in Kalepa. Selected parcels will be targeted for land prep, including tree clearing, amending the soil, amending the condition of the soil, implementing a crop rotation program in 1 to 3 years, and develop a crop rotation framework that includes both livestock and field crop. And this is a project, unfortunately, the pandemic came and we're working with CTAR, but what we wanted to try and do was to look at, I guess what they call cultural pasture lands, that makes it a lot more productive for livestock, and to tie this in with rotating, with crops. And this is only successful because we're growing sweet potatoes and ginger in that area that makes it viable for doing something like this. I'm still working on it. Hopefully this pandemic issue kind of subsides and we can have people on the ground to kind of coach the farmers to do this. Yeah. Next slide. The next slide is an audit recommendation priorities that we came up with. We put it into 3 categories: executive, administrative, and others. And I will just turn over this section to Mariki.
Thank you, Jimmy. Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. As you can see, we have been spending a great deal of time, particularly with the exception of Waihole, which started in late 1990s. In the early 2000s, working on the island of Kauai, and in the 2010s, working more actively on Oahu. Again, as Director Nakatani mentioned, the Kauai properties came, we like to term it as turnkey. So what we have been, and when we say turnkey, there were tenants on them. The tenants were primarily on the lands by revocable permits issued by DLNR. So just having tenants, occupancy on lands helps a lot with criminal activities, good land management, good stewardship of the lands. All of that was sort of turnkey. And what we've been working on, as Jimmy has mentioned, is moving forward with that area. In conjunction with our partners, our tenant partner co-ops in Kikaha, they've done a wonderful job. Our tenant co-op partners in Kalepa outside of Lihui, mostly ranchers, but as you can see, we're changing over some of the flatter B classified lands towards diversified agriculture. We've actually been, what I'm trying to illustrate is that we have been working actively. Our tenants are big contributors to that effort. they make a big difference and they make it a lot easier for us to work with them and to advance more diversified agriculture. And then in 2019, as we were progressing and making progress, we thought making progress through our dynamic superpowers, the audit came down. This audit, as you know, covers 25 years of ADC's operations since inception in 1994. It was a tremendous undertaking to try to fit 25 years of an organization's operations, performance, efficiencies, capabilities into one report. I think was just an enormous task. The result was 28 recommendations directed at staff and 5 more recommendations directed at the board of directors. For staff, when the recommendations came down, tackling the recommendations was overwhelming. And so what we tried to do was take little bites of it apart. We took the recommendations apart and we tried to compartmentalize them, categorize them into more workable groups. We came up with 3 groups: the executive group, the administrative group, and catch-all other group. The executive group, we felt, required high-level decision-making and analyses that was probably above the capability of staff, but we could at least prepare, do due diligence, gather information, prepare recommended options on how to address these things. These types of day-to-day tasks we could do to assist with the high-level executive type of recommendations. The administrative recommendations were more day-to-day operations. What we do, we come to work every day, and then what happens? So that's really within our realm, staff's realm. Those items that we felt dealt with the day-to-day operations. We also threw in the procurement issues and the HR recommendations. And HR is an interesting animal for ADC because we don't have an HR director. We are administratively attached to the Department of Agriculture, and we rely heavily on the department to help us with the HR requirements. They walk us through every step. They help us with all the forms, the DHERD forms, the BNF memos to the governor, discussions with any union people. I don't even know who the union people are. The HR people do it for us. They do a lot of that work for us. We don't have an HR person. But to me, HR and hiring is an administrative function. We threw it in with the administrative tasks. And the catch-all is, of course, everything else that I didn't know where else. We didn't know where else to put it. Next, oh, thank you. Okay. The next thing we did, so this is our process. We looked at this list of things that needed to be done. We compartmentalized them, we dumped them into buckets, and then we prioritized them. We listed them in the order of their priorities. The numbers on the left of each item represents the numbers assigned to the recommendation in the audit. So under executive item 1, update and revise mission statement, that would be the auditor's recommendation number 1. And we went forward that way. But without actually looking at how we were doing on it, whether we agreed with it or not, or whether we had made any advances on these areas of deficiencies. We simply prioritized them on what we thought were the most important to the least important. I don't want to say least important, in the order of priority, the most important at the top for each of the different categories. The third thing we did was substantively look at each item and determine how much work it would take, how far we had gotten, whether it had actually been done. We came up with a lot of categories for these, but we tried to, again, pare it down so it was easy, it was workable for us. And we came up with recommendations with which we did not agree, recommendations that were either done, fulfillment of the recommendations or addressing the recommendations that were either done or were duplicative of someone else's tasks. And the third was not yet done or in progress. the darkened items are the items that are done. So for instance, I can walk through all 28 if we have time. I'll try. So for instance, under the executive bucket, update and revise mission statement, our board of directors approved the mission statement as is at our meeting on August 25th last month. Recommendation number 2, develop goals, objectives, policies, and priority guidelines. I'm not really sure why that was included. The auditor included that, but that sounded to us like what we do every year in our Act 100 reports to the legislature. So at this point, that's our understanding. We marked it off as done because we do submit our reports every year. And our goals and priorities are listed there. Item number 6 is also darkened. Develop financial and other programs. We darkened that not because we have a financial program, but because the Department of Agriculture has a loan program. And we do a lot of referrals to them for people who come to us and tell us that they need startup capital or assistance. We just explained that we don't have the capability to make loans or grants at this time, and we refer them on to the department. We also refer them on to other agricultural lending agencies as well. Under the administrative bucket, darkened is number 21, evaluate the retention of a private property company, private property management company. And we tried this actually before the audit, and we had been unsuccessful on our properties on Kauai. We have no physical presence. Our office has no physical presence on Kauai, and yet we manage 19,000 acres of land there. So we were trying to find a management company, a property manager, and this is an HR situation event. And we had to go through the staff by contract request, and we were not successful. And I think DLNR raised this issue as well. When you try to hire outside services that could otherwise be done by a civil service position or state position, you have to explain why. And for property management, we were not successful at that. So we did work with the department's HR office, who helped us develop scopes that would allow us to have some of the services, that would allow some presence for ADC to help us with some of the tasks that a property manager would do without actually hiring a property manager. And that person would visit the lands during times of emergencies, would visit the lands intermittently, and report back to us on whether we needed to go out and actually immediately go out and visit the properties or take action. He was not a property manager though. So we darkened that because we tried it and it was rejected. I'm not sure, we didn't darken number 14, the very first recommendation under administrative, and we're still discussing that. There have been consultants who have been retained by ADC and other other state agencies. But I think that ag plan has to be dynamic. And so we need to take what we need to do. We don't want to throw good money after bad, good money after bad. We want to see where we are as far as those prior studies are, how far we've advanced, whether those recommendations from maybe 10, 20 years ago still hold true today. How revolutionary has agriculture been in Hawaii over the last 20 years? We need to be a little more critical of the recommendations made by, or the findings made by these existing studies that the state has spent a lot of money on already before we go forward. At this point, we didn't blacken that because I think that's something that needs more work. I do want to point out though that there are a lot of studies. We've provided some of those to this committee over the weekend, I believe, or maybe prior to the weekend. And it's going to be an analysis process that I guess the 6 of us will do. And I don't know if we can ask the board to help us. That's not clear to me yet. Going further down on the admin bucket, number 25. One of the recommendations was to attend training for procurement. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a big one. I'm sorry, 26, the third from the top. That's a big one. We have 12 staff, funded staff positions, and we're fully staffed as of August 5th. As of August 5th. We do have one additional position count, but it's unfunded. And then the third to the last, item 25. Attend training. We mark that off because we darken that because you can't do procurement without training, without certification, without going through all of the pods. I think there's a new training system now. You have to be approved to get into the pod before your password allows you into the pod. The types of training you need and the number of training pods you have to watch depends on the type of procurement you're going to do. It's heavily regulated. So our procurement officer, we don't actually have a formal procurement officer. Our fiscal officer used to do the procurement. Our project manager now has taken over that task. They are fully trained for what they're required to do. If they did not have their certifications, their requests for procurement would not be approved. It would get caught. So we darkened that. It just didn't make sense to us. On the other bucket, the miscellaneous bucket, we darkened prepare, number 11, prepare and revise as required the Hawaii Ag Plan. I believe that refers to the 163D-5 agribusiness plan. We submitted our plan we submitted it to the department, but it was completed in December of 2020. So we marked it as done. Our plan is to, again, like the other ag plan studies, review it every year, see if we've made any progress, and update it as needed. This we do in-house. This goes along with the question of whether we should hire a consultant that was in the administrative bucket. I think these two have to be worked through together very closely. Number 3, the third item, develop an inventory, actually 3 and 4. Develop an inventory of ag lands and of agriculture infrastructure. We have right now an Excel spreadsheet or several Excel spreadsheets in which we keep track of these assets. But when we talk, if I have time, talk to you about the work that is in progress, you'll see that we are in the process of soliciting quotes, I believe, for a land management platform to help us. Nothing as complicated or complex or as large as the DLNR's Public Land Trust Information System, something more geared towards an entity like us that has 100 leases and 20-something thousand acres. Something more scaled down. That program should help us with license, leases, land management enforcement, ping us when tenants need to be reminded of things. It will help us keep track of accounting, I think. It will certainly keep track of the inventory and of the infrastructure. So these are all, hopefully in a year, we'll have this worked out. Our solicitation requests not only the platform, but the training for us, for a property manager to do this. So I think we're making good inroads in that. We did darken them, the actual list, because of our Excel spreadsheet, but we recognize that that's not the best way for a land manager to operate. Item 23, to evaluate the need for insurance. And this was another one that we didn't quite understand. I think the full recommendation talks about ADC-owned properties, insurance for ADC-owned properties. And My understanding anyway, is when state agencies acquire assets, we are required to list it in the fixed asset inventory system with DAGs upon acquisition. So it goes into the inventory. DAG's risk, Department of Accounting and General Services, Risk Management Division, every year somehow doing their magic, underwrites the risk to the state of all the different types of assets, determines what kind of insurance line would be required or appropriate for each type of asset, and then sends us a bill. I think they send the bill for each department based on the department's FAIS list. The department then breaks it down, allocates our share within the department, and we pay the bill for our premiums. So we do have insurance, and if we're not understanding that recommendation, we need to have further discussions about that. But if the recommendation is that we should get insurance for our fee simple lands, we pay for it every year. We pay it to DAG's Risk Management. Number 8, develop strategies to ensure transportation is addressed for agricultural products. This is one of those similar to the Ag Plan Consultant where we have, I think the prior executive director of ADC did retain outside consultants to address this very issue. It's still somewhat true today. It's still very true today. But again, we've darkened it because it was done, but it's like any other study and any other problem that any business has to look at. It's something that has to be, I think, revisited every so often. Sometimes it's public outcry. Sometimes it's something you may read in the paper. Sometimes it may just be anecdotally brought to your attention. Whatever the trigger, it should be reviewed. Maybe it's even something that should have a timeline in strategic plans, maybe ADC's strategic plan that every so many years, these issues should be revisited. These are things that we're considering as we go through all of these recommendations. Number 15. Number 15 and 16, we marked off, we darkened for the same reason. Obtain and document approval by the Board of Agriculture before project implementation, ADC project implementation, and also obtained policies and procedures for the approval of ADC projects. And we darkened those because I believe in 2008, the Department of Agriculture's board, the Board of Agriculture, approved the delegation of this oversight to the board chair. And it's never been revoked. So in our view, we did not have to go back to the board every time, but the Board of Agriculture, every time we wanted to implement a new project. I think that might be a point of contention. Maybe that's a discussion that needs to be had at this time. But until we are told otherwise, we operate under the 2008 delegation. On the items that are not, well, let me just get the do not agree item off our plate. Item number 22, administrative rules. And that's something that's always going to come up with ADC. I think administrative rules provide us a level of protection for the agency because we do the same thing pursuant to rules the same way every time, no matter who the applicant is, no matter who the tenant is, no matter who the enterprise is. You're going to be treated the same way every time. That's how government works. The question then for us all today is whether that's what we want for ADC. Do we want ADC to operate, for instance, under administrative rules, the same way every time for everyone, regardless of your station, your situation, your needs, your specific needs? We have operated, I think since inception, I can't speak for prior administrations, but I think since inception, ADC appears to have operated under the notion that we are supposed to address the unique requirements, the needs for change, and we're supposed to do it quickly. And rules would retard that, would slow that progress, that process. But I think that is really where we are today. What do we want? What do we want from ADC? How do we get ADC to know what we're supposed to do, to stop spending our time defending our statute, and be able to come to work every day and know what we're supposed to do. We're in a little bit of flux right now because we help small farmers, we get criticized for helping small farmers. We don't help small farmers, we get criticized for not helping small farmers. We're not really sure. It's chaotic right now, the amount of recommendations and criticisms that we get. The administrative rules, again, would provide a level of calm, of protection. And the question is that what you want, ADC? Not you personally, is that what we, the state, want for ADC? Do we want ADC to be more bureaucratic? Or do we want ADC to be given clear guidelines so that we can think outside of the box, so that we can be innovative without having to face so much criticism and threat of repeal? The remaining items are in progress, and you'll see this all come together because there isn't a lot to talk about at this point on them. The high level items, the executive branch, those really are high level, and we do need input from, I think, our board and maybe even members of the community. That might be fitting. We don't know yet. We haven't really addressed those high level items. The white items in unblackened items in the administrative bucket, you see items 20 and 19. And that's the electronic data system that I was talking about that I believe went out for solicitation last week. We agree actually with the next item, item number 24, recommendation number 24, to seek an opinion from the state procurement officer. I think that's a good idea. I think this is an item relating to rent credits. Our position is that rent credits are not a procurement instance. It's not a procurement event. It's like tenant improvements. And I think DLNR seems to treat it the same way. It doesn't make sense to have to go through the procurement process to see if a tenant, if a tenant or someone other than the tenant can do the investments or capital improvements on a specific tenant's property. This is a matter by contract with a tenant who is willing to invest capital into state lands, which will revert to the state at the end of the lease. This is purely a contract term, and people who have taken out commercial leases understand tenant improvements. We do not see that as a procurement event, but I think it's a good idea. We have had discussions with our legal counsel on it, but I still think it's a good idea to talk to the SBO. And so we're not disagreeing with that recommendation. On items 27 and 28, the last two on HR work, again, we don't have an HR officer. We're not going to ask the department's HR people. They don't know what our performance standards are. This is something we have to work on. I think we are too small to request our own HR personnel in-house. We need to figure out what to do. Since about 2017, however, we've had a lot of turnovers in the last couple of years. Since about 2017, we have started with the new hires doing the PASS personnel appraisal. It's a well-accepted system that the state uses to evaluate performance of employees. We call it the PASS. We have done that for the new hires since 2017, I would say, but not for us old guys. That's a challenge. That's going to be a challenge for us. And the question is really who. Jimmy's everyone's secretary, supervisor. So I guess he would have to do all 12 or 11. We don't know. We're working on that. Again, work in progress. And on the remaining whited out or lit item in other bucket, that's our annual report. We could have darkened that because we submitted an annual report. And we've submitted them for most years. I'm not sure why the criticism that we don't do annual reports. I think we missed a few since the early 2000s. Again, I don't know why, but it's an ongoing process again too. So we're going to be doing that every year. And we're just I think it's outstanding. The audit report came out in January, but we were able to, just in talking with the legislative auditor's office, his staff, going through the document production, we had a sense of where our areas of deficiencies were going to be. So we actually started, think about what our staff did. We are cooperating with the legislative auditor. We are producing documents. We're making ourselves available to answer questions. We are doing our own jobs. We all have our own jobs. And we are trying to improve our system all at the same time. It's an incredible group of people at ADC. Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with us. The last slide, challenges, and unfortunately, COVID is still around, so it kind of hampers our work. Of course, the lack of funding. I mean, that's always an issue with everyone. And for agriculture, we very focused on climate change and what are we going to do with that. And that's the way we concentrating a lot on reservoirs and making sure we have water, that kind of stuff. And our emphasis is a lot on irrigation. Food safety is always an issue. It'll just get stricter. We want to make sure that our farmers can comply, and that's always a challenge. And lastly is competing ag interests. Thinking about, small farmers versus big farmers, as Myra mentioned, some of the comments that are made. I mean, we get kind of caught in between and everything else like that, but, we do the best we can. And it's not to say, just make one comment about small farmers, big farmers. I don't think we are just married to just big farmers and everything. Like for me, coming from the agricultural sector, I mean, as a farmer, I kind of look at trying to help everybody, but what works, And then the other issue is like, what you're supposed to do export. At the same time, the emphasis from the legislature was food production. Okay. Doesn't make sense to export our foods if we need the food here. Of course, export is a very important component of agriculture, no doubt. But, it has to be balanced, and times change, things change. And so, Governor's eager about doubling food production. That was the hot button. And the pandemic shows you that kind of exposed us to, we need more local production. And, maybe fortunate we didn't, expend all money on, export. And the export, if you did export, you'd be in the beginning, I mean, you couldn't get flights out, even though you had the product, things like that. So everything changes, and pandemic has shown us a lot of weaknesses and strengths and where we should adjust. So, but as Myers mentioned, that for ADC, it's always a learning experience, And so I appreciate that you give us the time to share our side of the story. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that was about an hour. So I thank the testifiers for complying with my request. Let's take a 5-minute break. Members on Zoom will come back at 10:15. We are in recess. Reconvening our September 21st, 2021 House Investigative Committee to investigate compliance with audit numbers 19-12 and 21-01. Welcome back to the members of our public, to our committee members, and to our testifiers. With us again today is Executive Director Jimmy Nakatani of the ADC, Senior Executive Assistant Myra Kaichi of the ADC, and Ken Nakamoto, Project Manager of the ADC. Yes, Project Manager with ADC. So members, we're going to open up to questions now. Just a reminder, we're going to start with Rep. Hashem as Chair of the Ag Committee, followed by Representative Okimoto, Minority Leader, followed by LMG Chair, Representative Kobayashi, LMG Member, Representative Yamashita, Ag Vice Chair, Representative Peruso, Waterland Chair Tarnas, followed by Vice Chair Ichiyama, and then myself. We will be cycling through questions on various topics, and so we do have until noon with our testifiers. But if we finish earlier, we can also finish earlier. So let's start off with Chair Hashem. First question.
Okay, my first question, I'll go into, the audit comes out and says you didn't do anything prior to February 2020 to secure property. Is that a true statement?
Can you repeat the question?
I have my mask on.
Yeah.
The audit comes out and says you didn't do anything to secure your property prior to February 2020. Is that a true statement?
No. that's
Did you
not correct.
convey that to the auditor?
You know, it's really, I'm not sure if we conveyed that way he asked, or, you know, it's really, I don't know how to answer the question with the auditor. I mean, the information was there. You know, Mr. Nakamoto can expound on that because he was there, I think, from the beginning, almost every day, you know, trying to secure the area. And we did a lot of trying to discourage criminal activities, you know, putting boulders and barriers, et cetera, like that. So if I could refer that question to Mr. Nakamoto, he could expand on that.
So just to make the record clear, Chair Hashem, can you ask your question again of Mr. Nakamoto?
So the audit says you guys didn't do anything to secure your property prior to February 2020. Is that a true statement? And did you convey what you did prior to that to the auditor?
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Ken Nakamoto, Project Manager. I'm not sure if we conveyed that to the auditor as far as what the steps we took prior to address the security concern. But the statement of we didn't do anything to February 20, I think that partially true. The real statement is we didn't get the help from law enforcement until February 20, 2022. I mean, it took a joint law enforcement effort, both federal, state, and county enforcement to help sweep this area. And that's pretty much what happened at that point. You know, I guess the statement is from February 20 is when we started getting support from law enforcement.
Another one, second question, and I'll be done with it. It's regarding number 22, where it says primary, where I guess this is more of a statement rather than a question. The audit comes out and says you guys have no written procedures or guidelines, and I know you guys do. And in number 22, it says promulgate administrative rules to address, among other things, the application process used for ADC lands and assets, and it goes on. I actually agree with the auditor on this. You guys do have administrative rules. He's not really saying to go adhere to Chapter 91. I think you need to expand on your rules and policies and procedures, and you need to put that in writing, because the rules that you have in the written procedures you have in place now, I don't think it's sufficient. And you should write, your organization is to the point where you need written procedures to follow in case Jimmy is not there. So you need some kind of guideline for the next ED to come in and to follow, or even if when people change within your organization, you need to write down some of what you currently do on paper. So I guess I'm addressing Myra's statement of, shall we do this? Yes, there's way to write the rules so that way you can have flexibility. But I think the auditor is correct where you need to write something in there and have more. You need to expand on your current rules that you have in place now.
Madam Chair, may I address that?
Yes, you can address that.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Hashem. Actually, we have a investigative committee that was formed, again, because we could anticipate what was going to be said about our deficiencies. So the board formed an investigative committee, which is, for anyone familiar with Sunshine, a committee that can operate and can meet outside of the Sunshine requirements, the Sunshine notice requirements. However, there are certain requirements. They have to be created and the members announced and appointed, and the scope must be set forth in a Sunshine meeting, which was done. They have to go out and do their scope, do their task, whatever they were asked to do, and come back with findings and recommendations, which have to be presented to the big board at a Sunshine meeting, which was done, which they have been trying to do, but we don't have any recommendations yet. And the third thing is, at the third meeting, action can be taken by the big board on the recommendations of a otherwise exempt investigative committee, exempt from Sunshine requirements. This policy committee is asked to do exactly that, to develop the policies so that we staff can have the procedures that we know should be followed for instance, tenant dispositions, or for our competing interests, how to determine when we want to do livestock, when we want to recommend livestock versus vegetable crops versus aquaculture. We need that kind of guidance from them because we're not sure what the focus is, what direction the board wants us to go in any particular area without this type of guidelines. But what this policy committee is finding as it does its work is that the policy issues are so huge that they're asking us to get them help. That might mean retaining consultants to help them vet some of the issues that they're facing. It's turning out, in short, not to be as simple as we thought it was going to be, to just ask 3 people to sit down at a table and give us some guidelines, and hopefully the big board will approve this. It's turning out to be far more complicated. So yes, we completely agree with that our land management policies are too bare and do not provide enough guidelines and enough circumstances. It doesn't address enough circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. Minority Leader Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Chair Kobayashi.
Thank you, Chair. One of the issues that came up in yesterday's meeting with the auditor, I found to be very important in speaking to the sincerity with which you address this entire process and what we're doing here. So just to be clear, there are audit findings of which it was described as, I don't know, somehow innuendo that 28 was a lot, and that it was very much of a problem for you guys to have to deal with all these, and in addition to doing your own work. There's a process for audits that whereby the auditor, whether it's a state audit, a financial audit, forensic audit, will come out with points, and those don't just get published. I think you know that there is something called an exit meeting, where which is long enough time after the audit that you can have time to research the audit findings and determine whether or not you find them valid or not. And that is your opportunity to rebut anything there. Now, when I look at your responses, which have been provided to us to the audit findings, and I listened to your responses that Myra outlined just now,
they're really completely different. So a lot of the issues that were raised in the exit meeting that you didn't have any objection to, now you're objecting to. And moreover, what came out yesterday was that you didn't object to any of these, say the issues regarding policies and procedures and the issue about providing security for the vacant lots. You did not object to that in the exit meeting. And subsequent to that, you provided documentation to a single member of this committee saying that those were incorrect audit points. So is that something that you didn't understand, that the audit exit meeting was your opportunity to rebut these things and not to agree with them and come back to a single committee member later with documentation about why the auditor's points were incorrect? I'd really like to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, I'm going to interject here just to clarify something, Chair Kobayashi. The documents that are referred to were provided to the entire committee via myself, and it was the Agribusiness Development Corporation Whitmore Property Enforcement Timeline that was emailed to your office, as well as the Agribusiness Development Corporation Investigative Committee on Agricultural Policy, as well as the 2009 Land Management Policy and Guidelines, and an email interchange starting off with Ms. Myra Kaichi that was provided to the committee and not just a single committee member. So I have asked, and the ADC attorneys will be bait stamping this, and this will be made part of the record. So I just want to clarify that it was documents presented to the committee and not just a single individual committee member.
So we were provided with documentation, but my read on that documentation was completely different. So I assumed that other documentation was provided that, and it wasn't the ones that I was looking at, because I wouldn't have come to the same conclusion. I think many of us wouldn't have. So and that's really a moot point, because the point I really have is not whether it's one committee member or all, but that it's what your opportunity was to rebut anything in the audit findings was in the exit meeting, and not to agree with them and come back to us as a committee, if it wasn't the whole committee later, and say, well, actually, that was all incorrect. So there's some inconsistency between how you address the audit points in the exit meeting and then the emails and documentation that you sent the committee. So I'll rephrase it that way. I'd appreciate an answer.
Okay, so Ms. Kaichi, can you respond to the question, which is why is there an inconsistency between the audit response that was Chair Kobayashi, can you rephrase your question, please, for Ms. Kaichi about the exit interview?
Okay, I didn't think it was that confusing, but your answers to the exit interview are inconsistent with what you provided the committee recently in terms of your accusations against the auditor.
Thank you, Representative Kobayashi. I don't think we are accusing the auditor of anything, first of all. Secondly, I don't know that this document existed in this form. If we're talking about the timeline, the criminal activity and security timeline, I don't know if that existed as of March of 2020, because well, March of 2020, I don't actually know if this existed. But I think the way the process worked with us and the auditor was they would send us typically emails, sometimes phone calls, and ask for documents. I'm thinking if this document did exist, that it wasn't asked for. If it was asked for, it would have been provided. As for why it's coming back to me now as I read our emails and documents that have been requested by this committee for purposes of this investigation. When we got the phone call to set up the exit interview, we were told that we would have the opportunity to review the draft audit report, that the recommendations would not be provided to us in the draft, that the audit recommendations were for the legislative auditor's office, not for us. And this came back to me as I read my emails to our board, that our comments and responses would not change the audit report. And so that's the background against which we were operating at the time. The audit report was provided, the draft was provided to us on December 23rd of 2020. And we were given a deadline of January 7th. And in between December 23rd and January 7th, there were like 2 sets of weekend days and 2 holidays. So that we had a total of about 9 working days within which to develop a response to this. And we wanted to develop a draft response and shoot it out to our board members to get their input as well. So I think we made the determination at that point that we were not going to go point by point. There were so many allegations contained in the report that we were not going to go after them point by point, and we were going to take a higher level response to it. The one point we did talk about was our belief, our position that discussing ongoing litigation was inappropriate. That was the only thing that we thought was, we wanted to spend the finite amount of time that we had in those 9 days to address specifically. The rest, we just kind of compartmentalized them again. I guess I like to do that. We compartmentalized those issues that could fall into the, disagree, not agree, or comment.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question that, so your point is that the reason why you didn't provide specific rebuttals at the time in the exit meeting to the auditor's findings, not allegations, are because you were under the understanding the audit report would not change as a result of whatever you said. But the audit report is what it is. But part of the audit report is your responses, so that it would become part of public record. Was that not made clear? That was the idea? Was your understanding that your responses to the audit findings would not be public, 1? And 2, did you request additional time beyond the 2 weeks that you were given to prepare your responses of the auditor's office and try to schedule a later exit meeting if that was a concern?
I don't have any recollection of any of that. My recollection is coming out of rereading our emails to our board members. So I don't actually remember whether we asked for an extension and was told no, or we didn't ask for an extension. I don't remember that.
How about your understanding of the audit, your responses to the audit findings being part of the record as well, and that it would, as a result, obviously make sense for you to address any things that you thought were incorrect at the time?
We understood that the response would be part of the record, and we thought this would make sense.
To not address the audit findings at the exit meeting?
At the exit meeting?
Yes.
We did address some things at the exit meeting. It was more I think we focused more on the sensational nature of the way the audit was presented, though, again, not the specific facts.
It didn't seem that so sensational to me. I mean, it seems a standard run-of-the-mill audit report. And I remind you that we're not here to judge the auditor's report. I mean, we're here to look at the findings. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And keep going back to auditor's allegations or, somehow that there's something wrong with the report and the findings, where that's really not what we're here for. So thank you.
For your comment, Chair Kobayashi. Chair Yamashita?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I want to ask a few questions a little later, Chair, but I just want to say that I believe that ADC in my time in the legislature has improved immensely, and I commend you for all your work that you have done. I remember when I first got into office, we used to kind of joke that ADC was just a water system manager, but you have gone well beyond that since, and I just want to say that I do appreciate the work that you have put in, and I will ask questions later, but at this time I'm going to pass.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair. I said Chair now. So LNG member, Ita, Vice Chair of Ag, Caruso, your question.
Yeah, so this question is actually for Myra, because you are responsive to the question at hand, which is the audit. So you did seem to focus on the recommendations though, rather than the findings. And I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to yesterday's session, but the auditor again emphasized that the value of the audit is in what they find and not necessarily in what they think you should do about it. So I'm curious about why there were not more conversations with the auditor about the audit, especially because there seems to be some serious confusion about some of the recommendations based on conversations that just I have had with him. But I want to ask a question about this issue of planning. So the audit did find that ADC has failed to create a meaningful master strategic agribusiness plan that addresses statutory requirements. So on page 10 of your draft ADC strategic agribusiness plan, which is dated December 17th, 2020, which was written in response to the audit, I'm sure. You noted that over the past 25 years, all the plantations have closed, and many of the 9 items listed in HRS 163D are obsolete or duplicate the function of the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. So you seem to argue in your plan and in the ED's conversation with the ADC board, as noted in the minutes, that the current statute regarding ADC activities, planning and reporting is outdated, should no longer bind your agency, and should be dramatically modified. And I will say that I think that some of my colleagues and I may agree. For me, the question that remains is about the direction of change. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think that the determination of the direction of change for ADC is your prerogative or the prerogative of the legislature?
Wow. I don't know the answer to that. I would hope that it would be a broader discussion amongst all interested parties, and the goal being what's best for the interests of the state. I don't actually think I'm the proper person to answer that question. I think that's a very high level question. And do you want to redirect that question?
If Mr. Nakatani would like to answer that question, that would be fine.
Chairperson, I'm not sure what the question is. I mean.
So the question is, just brief recap. The question is, there's a resistance to the master strategic planning, right? It's expressed in multiple places. It's also expressed in your own strategic plan. I would say 8 out of the 9 items on which you're supposed to report, you defer to work that's already being done or you think should be done by the Department of Agriculture. So you are essentially, I wouldn't say evading responsibility, but definitely saying that it's not your responsibility or that it's already been done by the department. So, and there seems to be an argument, I've heard it in the board meetings about whether or not those items should fall under your purview, whether or not those should be your responsibility. And I'm saying that I would agree that there needs to be some change. And I'm asking, do you think that the direction of that change is your prerogative as the executive director and the board of ADC, or is it the prerogative of the legislature? Do you want us to do it, or do you want to tell us what you think should happen?
I think that, thank you for the question. I think that, as Myra pointed out, it's not as simple as today I can give you an answer, yes or no. I think that's a question that we should sit down with the Department of Agriculture. I think there's a lot of things that pointed out that been done, and some of the issues that they brought out is a duplicate, and some of it is like, we could benefit by sharing each other's knowledge, I guess, or cooperate with each other much better. One of the things that you really kind of want to look at is that if you don't have data and marketing, it's pretty difficult to do any type of planning. And that's something that we should sit down with the department to see who can do it best. and have that discussion. But I don't think that it's simple. Yeah, I want to just get rid of this this program just because, you know, it's doesn't fit with the purview of the department with ADC. And you know, that discussion should be happening or should occur between the department and us. And, you know, I mean, really look at that. And I think you should involve the agriculture community, because at the end of the day, who's going to benefit and who's, you know, it will be the agriculture community. So that would be, you know, a monumental, maybe not a big, anyway, a huge task, I think that we should look at and kind of figure out who can best do what and where. And it's not
Okay,
to
so
say
as,
that-
yeah.
Like, can I just finish? And
Sure.
just that, you know, anyway, we should be talking about that and not make a decision here and say, okay, we should just do this and that, stuff like that, you know.
Right. So I agree. My sense of this committee hearing was it provides precisely that opportunity. I was hopeful that you would bring to the table your response to the audit and your recommendations to move forward. Not the recommendations, not on the recommendations, but on the findings, and precisely about the conversations that you've been having with your board, right? So what do you think needs to be changed in statute? And so I will say that during session, I specifically asked you when you were working on your strategic plan to please make it more community-based so we could have these conversations about strategic planning. And I'm curious about who wrote your strategic business plan.
I'm sorry, but are we talking about the strategic plans or what are we really talking about?
We're talking about it's published on the Department of Ag's website, ADC Strategic Business Plan. And so it outlines the reporting requirements on one of the pages, reporting requirements from 1994, and then the 2020 responses. It's in green. There are lots of pretty pictures.
It's like 22 comment. You know, the audit came out the beginning of the year, and so I think we should be given a chance to kind of address some of those issues. And with regards to a strategic plan, I think that it was ADC's strategic plan. I think we should, and the Department of Agriculture, as I understand it, is working on their strategic plan. And it would make a lot of sense that we can tie those two plans together and kind of plan a strategy for agriculture. I don't think it's meaningful or fruitful for any organization, ADC or the department, to do this in a vacuum. And that's part of the challenge for agriculture. But we had a plan, we submitted it, and plans are, you know, plans are plans. It's, you know, liable for changes and everything like that. And it may change next year. But I think we should be given a chance to at least digest this thing and
Okay, I'm going to interject here.
question.
Mr. Nakatani, I'm going to interject here. The specific question is, who wrote the December 17th,
I did.
2020?
Myself and my staff did put it together.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nakatani.
Yeah, I misunderstood the question, sorry.
But we also understand your other comments, but yes,
Okay.
so we understand that was an ADC-driven, staff-driven document.
That's
And
correct.
that you're saying it's a work in progress. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Chair Tarnas, your next question.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the ADC leadership for being here today. I am, as a planner, I am interested in a follow-up question to Rep. Russo's line of questioning about your agribusiness development plan. You submitted it in December 2020, but from the auditor and his presentation and the audit, when he asked you, Director Nakatani, where's the plan? He reported that you said the plan was unnecessary. It's all in your head. And I'm trying to understand why, if you could explain to the committee why you didn't see it as important to develop an agribusiness development plan prior to December 2020, because you've been working there for some time. And it seems like an essential document to guide ADC and to inform the public and all the stakeholders about the direction you're going, including the legislature. So if you could help us understand why for most of the time you've been serving as director, you did not think it was necessary to complete that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Representative Tarnas. I don't think it's true that I made the statement that I'm not, I didn't think it was important. You know, when the question asked me, why wasn't there a plan? And I think Myra was talking about this. I mean, if you go back, I mean, I came into, this job into ADC in 2012. And to just, and it's a matter, I mean, we had so many priorities and everything else like that. And it's not that I didn't want to do a plan, it was just a matter of priorities. And so after the auditors, were done, I said, okay, I can do a plan. I mean, I have, and this is a part about the auditors. They take things out of context and everything like that. That's pretty offensive. And so we did the plan. Okay, I didn't say what not important. There are many, many agricultural plans out there. Okay, I mean, if you go to the Department of Agriculture, you can see many plans on the shelf, and it goes from 74, 76, 78. I mean, and priorities change, but basically it's the same plan. But what I decided to do, and just reading from the critics from, like LRB and everything else like that, they said, we don't really need another agriculture plan. What we need is a strategic plan. And that's what I set out to do. I can do a strategic plan for agriculture. And so we did that. We did that in-house, in staff. And I thought it was pretty reasonable, pretty good. I mean, we need to be updated every year, but that's not true that I didn't think it was important. I don't know where that notion came. But as I said, the main point I think is that we did a plan and we submitted it. And I hope everybody read it.
Okay, thanks. I just was curious why it took 7 years after you started work there. And I understand now that you had other competing priorities that took all your time. And so you didn't make that a priority. I wanted to ask a follow-up on that one more, because in the statutory creation for ADC, the legislature is emphasizing producing crops for export, field crops. I heard your presentation saying that you pivoted to produce food for local consumption because of the governor's food security priority, but the legislature really set you up and we established the priorities, and export and field crops were the priority. And so a strategic, your agribusiness development plan or your strategic plan would be the place where you could then refocus and justify it. And because you didn't have that agribusiness development plan, you didn't know. Could you explain to me how you felt it was within your authority to completely pivot away from export to do something that was not directed to you by the legislature?
This is, okay, so I'm not sure why you're saying that we haven't done export. Okay, so in my presentation, I tell you export industry, sweet corn industry is an export industry. We're doing sweet potatoes as a export industry. There's some other industries, mainly on the Big Island, that, for example, papaya and everything. We don't have the staffing, we don't have a lot of things to get that industry going. We did put some seed monies into doing that. But things change. I mean, what do we have to export? What would be the crop to export? And so what would be the priority at the time? And if so if you're saying that I'm guilty of not doing export and doing field crops for feed the people of Hawaii and producing local, looking at import replacement, then I guess, yeah, I take responsibility for that. But export has its place. I'm not saying that export is very, very important, but export is not the only thing for agriculture for Hawaii. I mean, we should put that in. We should look at the resources that we do, like shipping. I mean, it kills export. I mean, how do you get your product off, you should, like from the Big Island to Honolulu. I mean, it costs almost the same cost to ship, your shipping cost from the Big Island to Honolulu is almost the same as from Honolulu to the mainland. And so those are the kind of issues. It's not that simple. And agriculture is not that simple. I mean, if there's a time, there's a place, if there's a product to help to get export, then we should do it. And if we didn't do it, then that's fine. But to say that you're responsible for a crop that you should plant to export, I mean, it's also the responsibility of the farmer or, the risk takers. It's not only on ADC. I mean, the person doesn't want to grow it or the industry doesn't want to grow it, then what are we supposed to do? I don't think that's government's role.
Thank you. I just want to, thank you, Director Nakatani. I just want to emphasize that what you've just gone through is the rationale for refocusing on something different from what the statute says you should do, which you may be completely justified in doing. It's just that that's really the purpose of coming out with your agribusiness development plan, your strategic plan. So everyone else knows that these are the reasons why you've changed from what you were directed to do. That's my focus of the question. And I'll come back to in my next circle around.
I didn't seem to get excited and everything, but it seems like agriculture that's what my heart is in agriculture. So, I want to make sure that, we can move together.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's not just you. I appreciate that, Director.
Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ichiyama.
Director Nakatani for being here today. I feel like there's over the years been an evolution of agriculture in our community. And where I see a lot of confusion that's coming out of this report, including in your response to the auditor's report itself, is what is the role of Department of Agriculture? What is the role of ADC? And even to extent, what is the role of CTAR? I feel like there's a lot of overlap, and it's been referenced several times in our discussion today.
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to hear your comments about how do we best utilize our limited resources with all of these partners.
Yeah. That's really a great question, and we should be all together. I mean, theoretically, right, working together. For whatever reason, there's with CTAR, I mean, they have issues with funding, et cetera, like that. I don't have a good answer for that. I really think that, in fact, we should expand that. It shouldn't just be just CTAR, Department of Agriculture, and ADC. It should be, we should be, holding hands with UH-HILO, right? And, we should be holding hands with PBARC. We should be holding hands with HARC, because these are all research entities that can move things together. Why we haven't done that, I'm not sure. Okay. What I know is that there's a lot of pressure on ADC to produce and move forward. And, that's where my priorities are. I mean, I would love to have that conversation with all the entities, and we should do that. And, in the past, because funding is scarce, right? So we should be having the brainstorming session to see what we're going to do and how we can help each other complement and not duplicate that. But to give you a clear answer, I mean, the relationship is, I would say, okay. I mean, but I think what you're looking for is how do we move agriculture forward and having a really super agency move forward, yeah? And, I think that's a great idea. And, maybe resolution, I'm not sure. But I think we can do a lot more for agriculture if we all work together. I mean, the relationships are okay. I mean, they're cordial. We work together. There's not like at each other's neck. I think what you're saying is what the relationship, how we can come together and really push agriculture forward, and we can come to the legislature and say, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to build the papaya industry. We want to engage the nursery industry. We need to do this because we need another cultivar for flowers, because that's what's going to put us on the map. That kind of stuff like that. I mean, there's so many good things that can happen, and we're on the horizon. And I tell my staff sometimes, we're an agricultural renaissance. And I don't know if they believe me or not, but this is what's going to happen. And you see all the technology coming out, and it's pretty exciting, technology and everything else like that. And but we're kind of somehow not moving. But I hear you, and I think that we'll try. We'll do our best. Thank you.
I think that it is an important discussion to have because what I hear from your, even just reading your strategic business plan is that it doesn't seem to be defined lanes, right, for everybody to work in.
Yeah.
And so I think some clarification around it would be helpful. My second question is whether or not you considered requesting any changes to your statute. And would you be putting any proposed legislation forward to address maybe some of the changes that have happened in our state since 1994?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting hard time to hear your question again.
Will you be putting forward any proposals to change your statute? I think in light of the discussion that we're having today and some of the questions about overlapping.
As I said before, that's an interesting question. But we should have a bigger discussion to see what the impacts would be before we just make a decision and say, we don't want, we just want to move things around. Being around in the legislature a long time, there's always, there's questions like, well, and maybe this is not politically correct, but, we should divide the Department of Agriculture and take away all the non-regulatory stuff and put it elsewhere. We should put some this back to DBED and everything else like that. So what you're saying is not really, I guess, new, but that you're right. We should have that conversation because we are having this audit, and we should do something productive, and we should maybe divide the work and everything. But one thing I know is that what's missing from all of this is that in order for agriculture to move forward, we need that piece of data gathering. Now, whoever does it, it doesn't matter, but that's a really critical piece because it's hard to do planning for import, export without having data, before you, know what's going on and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have two questions. First one on staffing that I think is pretty simple, and then a question about subsidiaries and cooperatives. So first question, Ms. Kaichi, you discussed how you folks discounted the notion of hiring a private property manager and that you may have gotten guidance from DHER, BNF, DAGs in the decision to make to decide not to go with a private property manager. So the question is, do you have records from those agencies that helped you come to that decision that a private property manager would not be a way that you, a pathway that you would follow?
Yes, thanks for the question. Your background premise, setting that question up, I don't think I agree with that, but factually, but what we do have, but it sort of doesn't matter because we have the paperwork that we have to submit. Hiring a person, even if we're exempt from Chapter 76, requires a lot of paperwork. DHER paperwork, BNH paperwork, DOH paperwork. We have all the paperwork all the way up to the point we got so close. We're just one step away from governor's approval and it stopped. So we have all of that.
Okay, and can you provide that information to the committee?
Sure.
I'd be interested in seeing that paper and those documents. Okay, the second area of questions is on subsidiaries and cooperatives. How many subsidiaries and cooperatives has ADC formed throughout its history?
None.
So the auditor says ADC is unique with powers. It also has the power to form subsidiaries with all the powers of ADC and organized cooperatives. So there are no ADC subsidiaries. Is that correct? Is that correct?
That's correct. A while back, we looked at the forming a subsidiary, And we did a lot of legwork and things like that, but somehow we decided not to pursue it. And the example we looked at is that, Waimea, what is that, Falls, by under OHA, they're a subsidiary. And what we try to do is ask for information, and we're thinking about forming a subsidiary. And for whatever reason, I think we stopped. And at that point, it was either we weren't able to fund it or we weren't able to get enough information to move forward. But we did consider it, and looking at that, because that's an example about a nonprofit subsidiary. And I think why we stopped is that they were kind of like under controversy at one point, and we're saying, well, we have enough controversy for ADC, and we decided not to pursue that. But it's not to say that we wouldn't pick it up again and look at it, how it can benefit ADC.
Okay, but in its long history, you have not created subsidiaries. And I just want to understand the organization and take that off the table as something that's in your portfolio. You don't have that.
Yeah.
Now, you have the opportunity to organize cooperatives. My understanding is that you have a cooperative with the Kauai property. Can you explain that business model?
I'll answer that. But first, Chair, may I revise my answer to the HR question? I was thinking about the secretary. We had asked for a secretary position, which was given to us. Thank you very much. It was funded. We got so close because as our work ramped up, our existing secretary was just drowning. She was underwater. And so we had asked for another secretary, and that's the position that we came so close to getting, but was denied. On the HR though, I'm the same process. I think we have paperwork for as far as we got. I know it was a staff by contract issue, so I'll look for those paperwork. So that's why I hesitated when I first answered your question about whether ADC has formed any subsidiaries or cooperatives. ADC has not formed these types of entities, but we enter into contracts with cooperatives that operate and are established on their own privately. So they're private organizations that ADC enters into relationships with. They're not our co-ops, and we're not a member of it.
Okay, so that's an important clarification. Can you explain how the cooperative works? The contract that you entered into with the Kauai property and how that works with that cooperative?
I'll do that. Kauai is my island. So this, if everyone did their homework and watched the KAA video on the work that they do up there, the Landis mentioned that they were formed in 2003. I found that interesting because that was the year that ADC received the executive order for the 12,000 acres in Kekaha. The members came on the land already from DLNR. I just checked this morning, they were all on the land through RPs, and RPs are just the vehicle that DLNR uses. It expires within, not that it expires, it's a month-to-month revocable permit, not to exceed 1 year. If you wanted to go beyond 1 year, you have to extend it for yet another term, another year. So these tenants were on there under RPs. They came over to ADC, they established, I'm just putting it, I don't know this from personal knowledge, be clear, I'm just putting together what I saw from the video this morning, that they established themselves and started to talk to ADC about taking care of the infrastructure. And just from listening to Landis, you understand his historical knowledge and expertise of the area. These are people who understand how many hours it takes for a drop of water to reach the plains once it enters the system. At the initial intakes, they know, he said, I think 4 generations. He's the 4th generation of Kekaha expert, resident, who knows this area. So they formed these members, I think they were RP holders with DLNR at the time, and then with ADC when it's transferred, formed the cooperative with the understanding that they would take care of the infrastructure because they had the expertise. They also, by the way, had access to the capital, needed the funds, needed to to do the improvements and the repairs and the upkeep. And if you heard, I forget which one of us spoke about it, but the RMOA, the restated memorandum of agreement with the KA, or the initial memorandum of agreement was not entered into until 2007. That tells you that it took years. It's a complicated, it's a license agreement. It's a memorandum of memorandum of agreement where things that are supposed to do, but it's also a license. And it's not, it has incidents of land license. They have the right to actually possess the lands under the infrastructure, but it's also a license for them to use the infrastructure to generate electricity. Again, these are the innovative things that ADC we thought was tasked with doing. So I don't know that it's ever been done before. Maybe DOT has some sort of operating agreement that is similar to it. I don't know. We tried to keep this as bare bones as possible because we knew that we had never done this before. We entered into the agreement. It took us years. I was ADC's counsel at the time. We took years to get this done, late nights and dinners. And we knew that there were bugs, but it was getting to the point where we couldn't put off entering into some sort of written agreement with them. So we entered into the agreement in 2007, knowing that we had to come back and fix some of the bugs. We did that, and we call it the RMOA, the restated MOA, in 2008. And this is 2021, and we know that there are still more bugs. And we're just trying to find the time to sit down again, maybe from another series of late nights, to fix those bugs. It's again a work in progress because this has never been done before. So that's the backdrop. The agreement itself requires that the co-op, that is all the members, okay, I don't want to get technical, but so a 421 co-op has different types of members. The prime members are the ones who get to vote. The prime members are the bigger seed corn companies, and I think that's it. The 4 seed corn, maybe the shrimp company, the bigger tenants. We call them our anchor tenants out in Kikaha. They get to basically make the decisions they have a board of directors, of course. They get to make the decisions on how the co-op is going to function. Under this RMOA, they have to, of course, keep in touch with ADC because we're the landowner. We are in constant contact with them. Maybe not so much in the last 2 years, we've been a little busy, but before then, almost on a daily basis, sometimes at least weekly, we are always in contact with them. They have to provide us with their financials so that we can see where the monies that we split from the rents went, how they were spent. We want to make sure that it goes back into the infrastructure. It behooves them to do this because I think that's a condition of their tax status as an agricultural co-op. I'm not a tax lawyer. I don't know that for sure. And we don't watchdog them. We work with them, and we come up with budgets together, and we rely on them to tell us when the infrastructure is going to be needing repairs, when they anticipate the infrastructure will age out. We rely on them because they have that kind of expertise that we in Honolulu don't have. Actually, we can talk about our asset manager position later. We're finding that very few people in the state have that kind of knowledge on how to age out 100-year-old infrastructure. And maybe in the country, they're hard to find. Based on this, I don't know how many years the RMOA goes, maybe 35 years. I don't actually know that, but I think we've provided the document. It should be listed there. We provide them, I think, I know we've provided them with materials and supplies. Sometimes we actually do the procurement for outside consultants and experts. Sometimes they do it. Again, it's just a dynamic relationship going back and forth. And the most important thing, the driving force behind every decision that we make together is to make sure that we're going to take care of the land, take care of the water, and take care of the infrastructure to ensure that agriculture can continue there, that the lands will not return to swamp.
No, thank you. I think we're going to be revisiting this because this area was a subject of the second subpoena to understand what's happening on the Kauai lands. Was there any, and one last question on this, there was questions about scope of the audit. In the engagement meeting with the auditor, was there any discussion about the scope and whether it would include all of your lands, or was it so simply focused on the set of lands that the report seemed to finalize on? If you can recall anything from those scope meetings or initial engagement meetings with the auditor, either the auditor or the auditor's team.
I don't recall, and I just read that letter this morning. The initial engagement, I don't recall, but it's in the documents. I imagine I'm guessing at this point. I'm guessing it's
Don't
80.
guess,
Okay,
don't
thank
guess.
you.
We'll look at we'll look, so, but there is emails in the documents you provided us that will inform us about what the scope of the audit was when you first might have met with the auditor.
I don't remember, they're probably on the tapes. I don't remember.
Okay, can you explain what you mean by on the tapes?
If we were interviewed prior to the issuance of the letter that I read this morning, which I thought was the initial letter, initial communication, but you might be right, we probably had meetings with them prior to the issuance of that letter. I just don't remember what we discussed.
Okay,
This-
and
with
those
respect to
meetings would
scope.
have been interviewed by the auditor's office, the staff, or the auditor's staff. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe for the initial meeting, I would think that the auditor was present. Again, I don't remember.
Okay. Mr. Nakatani, any comments on what you understand was the scope of the audit at the engagement stage of the audit?
Sorry, I don't remember. It was, I know we had a lot of interviews, took a lot of time. I don't recall the scope, and I don't recall them asking me at any time about, neighbor islands, Kauai or anything like that. I mean, that's my recollection.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the next question, Chair Hashem. Chair Okimoto. I don't believe she may be on. Chair Kobayashi.
Thank you, Chair. So just following up on questions on scope of the audit, as you understand it, I might have a little confusion on the scope. It was during your presentation, there was described a litany of woes caused to the agency by the decision to audit them because you guys are busy and it was really put offing that you had to be audited. Now, one of the comments made was that you were audited for 25 years of results. Now, my understanding that the audit scope was set to be for current operations. Now, that necessarily will involve, like any audit, looking at some historical documentation that might date back times. But I mean, I've audited entities that are over 200 years old, and I'm not looking at documents written in quill pen. I mean, I'm basically looking at their current operations with some context. I might have to look to the past. Is your understanding of the scope that they were really auditing 25 years of operations? Sorry,
I can take a stab at that, Representative. When you ask the question that way, and I think back on what I read in the audit report, it is current operations. The background talked about 25 years, but the discussions were what we do today.
Okay, so there's maybe some misunderstanding on really, it was framed that, okay, because the auditor, audited us, we had to endure a lot of issues with too much work. It was really putting off for employees, for their families. It was even said it was not good for the people of Hawaii. So the audit is not just driven because the auditor wakes up to decide to audit something. It's either by legislative mandate, by public outcry, and there's been quite a bit. So just to make clear, it wasn't just some frivolous thing that he woke up one day and decided to do it. It was decided by us and by the people of Hawaii. Thank you.
Okay, Rep. Russo.
Yeah, I do have additional questions. So this question is for Director Nakatani. And as you know, I represent Wahiawa and Whitmore Village, so I've always been really concerned about community vulnerability and legal risk. And I'm sure you remember Malia Vamaho's murder was clearly the catalyst, I agree, that led to more intense efforts to work with law enforcement to address criminal activity on ADC lands. But as I've shared with your staff and with police, there's ongoing illegal activity on those lands. So this ongoing struggle to address criminal activity on ADC lands in Whitmore Village suggests that this is not going to be an issue that's easily resolved by ADC. And I think going back to the purpose for the creation of ADC, which was the development, as I read the statute, it was for the development of agribusiness enterprises, not the management of former sugar and pineapple plantation lands. So then I also turn to this question of, you know, are you, given the prior issues or the difficulties you're encountering, are you still planning to try to turn these lands in Whitmore over to the Hawaii Department of Agriculture or some other entity to manage, as you have on Kauai? And if so, this is the real question for me, what safeguards will you put in place that prevent the state from being exposed to the level of legal risks that we are to which we're exposed on Kauai? Sorry, that's a compound question, but I think it's clear.
So what was the question?
Okay, so
I'm not sure what you're looking for.
Okay, I can recap really briefly. The question is, even though you're experiencing difficulties with getting someone to manage the lands in Whitmore, those ADC lands, so that's what I heard previously from Ms. Kaiichi, if I'm correct. And then so that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, the most important part of the question is, what guardrails will you be putting in place to protect us, the community and the legislature, from the legal risks to which we are currently exposed on Kauai, as evidenced in the violations of, you know, federal law and lawsuits?
Still don't understand our question. Myra, can you? Okay, so with regards to Whitmore, what you're saying, I'm not clear on Whitmore, but I think that as we bring in tenants, I think that will kind of solve the security issue and development. As far as moving the management of the land to Department of Agriculture, is that another question did you ask?
DOA or any other entity?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, that's not, we don't do it in a vacuum. You know, the receiving party needs to agree, and we need to kind of sit down and look at this collectively. That's always a possibility. We did turn over the Tomorrow Warehouse in Wahiawa. We did move that that building to the University of Hawaii for a food innovation center. So it really depends on the proposal and the receiving entity.
I think I'm not asking about transfer of land. I'm asking about management.
I think that as far as.
Can I interject and maybe re-ask your question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so on Kauai, you have entered into a contract with a cooperative of tenants that manage those lands. I believe and Vice Chair Pruso, please correct me if I'm wrong. What Vice Chair Pruso is asking is, do you foresee a time when maybe the Whitmore lands may be organized as a cooperative so that you would enter into a contract with that cooperative similar to the Keikaha lands? Is that a better phrasing of your question?
Yeah, definitely that's a possibility. And it all depends on, as Mara pointed out, that cooperatives and everything is not a simple task. One of the advantages or one of the success on Kauai is because you have people with resources. and they can afford to chip in and pay and do the security and the roads and everything else like that. If that would happen in Whitmore or any other place, I don't think we have an issue with that. I think we would welcome that. And it's like, less, it's a better thing because they control the destiny and everything else like that. But that would be super ideal, for us. I don't think any organization would turn that down if you could, have a structure like KAA on Kauai. Because, that's really a good structure.
Okay.
They're
And I-
very responsible. They have security. They have all of that.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that that's like an ideal situation. They're nowhere near that at this point. So, but if that could happen, that you
Right.
could move that because the model is in place. A contracted cooperative model is in place.
That's correct.
Vice Chair Peruso, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, so I really feel like the second part of my question was the most important part and still has not yet been addressed. So the issue of the management of those lands by KAA was not addressed in the audit. But just a perusal of the literature available reveals multiple problems. Lawsuits, violation of federal law. And so I'm asking, my second question, part of that question was, if we do use the same model or any kind of other management model, are you folks in discussion about how to prevent those same kinds of legal risks from the state being exposed to those same kinds of legal risks?
I hate to play tag team, but I think I might be better able to address that. I don't know. if
Yes,
I can really-
please.
Okay, I'm gonna try my best and pull me back online when I start to veer off, because I think I understand your question. And my knee-jerk reaction is, it's hard to answer that question because lawsuits depend on the circumstances. So the lawsuit I think you're referring to on Kauai is the Clean Water Act, the federal water issues that resulted because Department of Health told us we would not qualify for an NPDES permit. And so we pulled our application and were immediately sued. I don't know that would be an issue in Whitmore, Clean Water Act issues. Maybe if we're discharging into Kaukonahua Stream, that could arise. But again, it's so specific.
So I guess my question is getting at, like, are you going to have better quality control over the kinds of farming that's allowed? So that's dangerous farming practices using intensive pesticides. And I think that's what the federal law is meant to really kind of protect the community from. So I guess that's really my question about strict criteria about the folks who are allowed to farm by the managing organization. And so I guess that's a broad question and, hard to predict, but I am very concerned about guardrails, about any organization that's going to manage those lands.
Right, and we, as a landowner, we want to hear those concerns before we start issuing policies. Those are the types of issues that our policy committee has been asked to look at. And I'm sure they're going to listen to this and they're going to take copious notes and incorporate that into their policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chair Tynes.
Thank you very much. I'm interested now to just pivot a little bit to talk about your means of land disposition. What is the mechanism you're using? We understand from the audit that you use licenses, but in the presentation from Ms. Kaichi, she referred to hundreds of leases. Now we've got license, leases, revocable permits. What do you use? And in fact, if you do use licenses primarily, why? And if you could explain to us what why did you choose that particular mechanism for your land dispositions? Thank you.
I'll give that a shot. I think it's not uncommon especially for huge landowners of huge tracts of land, particularly when they're vacant lands, to resort to using land licenses more than leases. Leases tend to, at least traditionally, require a very specific property description, like meets and bounds. Or for us, we have the tolling system, the land court system, where it's specific as, yeah. So when you have large tracts of land and you want to carve them up, but you don't want to subdivide them, you don't want to go through the subdivision process, land licenses are a little more lax. And I think traditionally, I have my lawyer hat on now, my real property lawyer hat on now. Traditionally, lenders would not touch a land license because of the lack of more definite property description. But I think lately, watching the trends across the country, I think more lenders are looking at it. Certainly in-house finance divisions of huge corporations are taking that risk. It's a risk assessment issue. And larger corporations can afford to absorb that risk. Can a small bank afford that? I'm not sure. Can a big bank afford that? I'm not sure. Again, it's a very unique risk assessment to each financier. We use it because.
Go ahead.
We use the land licenses again, because we're not going to subdivide the property, take the time to subdivide the property, but we do want to get the land out into the hands of the farmers as soon as possible.
And you chose not to use revocable permits.
We have some revocable permits as well. And what we, over the course of time, as we learn more about how these farmers work, particularly not the brand new startup farmers, but the farmers who are still relatively small and are trying to expand. And because when they come onto our lands are so new with the conversion from pineapple to diversified or green crops, we require that they get their soil and water conservation plans done first before they can till. So we will allow them RPs to come in and do minimal work so long as they don't disturb the soil. Sometimes we use ROEs, right of entries, yeah. And it's, again, it's that rule issue, administrative rule issue versus a policy issue versus actually entering into, that will tell us which of these vehicles is most appropriate, which would be best served, what the farmer would be best served by.
Okay. I wanted to ask a process question about these approvals, the approval process for these agreements. Do all of these licenses or RPs get reviewed and approved by a Deputy Attorney General for ADC?
Yes,
Okay, so they all went through legal check.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Back to you, Chair Belatti.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yesterday, we had asked the state auditor about the status of the financial audit of ADC. That was supposed to have been, they thought was going to be completed at the beginning of this year, but he explained that there was some additional difficulty. I was wondering if you could share from your perspective some of the challenges in completing that audit.
Okay. Sorry, Mayor, I gotta give you that question also. We're talking about the financial audit and why we haven't.
Oh, okay, so yeah, I'm glad to be able to answer that. I heard yesterday, it must have been must have been the auditor talking about us saying that we could not respond to them or could not cooperate with them as readily because we're going through this investigation. And I hope that I misunderstood that, but I think what we told our accountants, which as the auditor pointed out, we had to retain to help us understand what the auditor's accountants were trying to ask of us, the information they wanted from us, and to help us prepare our trial balances. Was that this week, we'd be busy this week, last week preparing for this week and for Monday and Tuesday of this week. So I just wanted to make that clear. ADC's point on why we were busy because of this committee, it was last week and this week. Prior to that, we have been working on a relatively regular basis with Acuity and our own accountants, KMH. And I think it was just last week, Thursday, we approved the MD&As, management decisions and analyses, whatever MD&As stand for. So I think we're really close. I think we're close.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that update. And then the second question is, do you plan to do future financial audits? Do you plan to continue doing financial audits in the future? Do you plan to do financial audits in the future?
I think that that's up for discussion, but I think that's a great idea. I'm not sure why, when I was a director at the Department of Agriculture, we used to do a financial audit annually. And maybe the department could do one and include us. I'm not sure, but that's not a bad idea, just to protect us. And I guess, listening to the auditors yesterday, I mean, whatever problems we have, we wanted to complete the audit, no matter how painful it was. So, we had issues going back, way back. It's like a checkbook, right? You make a mistake and you just don't correct it and it goes on and on. So we tried very hard to rectify all of the, and it's just sloppy bookkeeping in a sense. There's no fraudulent, I'm convinced there's no fraud or anything like that, but it doesn't, like Myra says, you don't get credit for being stupid, so, but I guess what we want to do for the future of our organization is to reconcile, rectify all of the records and everything else like that, come up to par. And that's a discussion maybe for the board. If we can afford it, that's a great idea. And as I said before, the department, we used to do an annual audit. And I used to go nuts because, you short of cash and everything is like, and it's expensive, right? And what is this thing? And then they cautioned me like we should do the audit. And for whatever reason, I think because of budget cuts and everything, everybody, chose not to do the audit. But, I guess this is the way it goes, right? If you do an audit and it keeps you out of trouble, it's fine. When you're not in trouble, it's like, why am I wasting this money? Because I'm doing everything correct. But that's something to consider, and we'll bring it up to the board. And if we're gonna, but it is something that we should seriously take a look at. And thank you for that comment, question.
Can I
Kristen,
interject
you
one
wanna
last? I'm sorry.
Do you want to add something?
Just one last sentence on the cost. We had been talking about this earlier, and we have actually been talking about it to our accountants, KMH, because we spent so much time and so much of our human resource on this audit. And we, I think, are going to get slammed, but we're getting so much out of it. So if we're gonna suffer this much, but benefit from it at the end of the day, well, at least I guess I didn't have the authority to ask, but I asked how much would this cost if we did this on a intermittent, a regular, frequent basis. And it was recommended to us that we do it on a quarterly basis. And I just thought, I didn't know if we could, we'll talk to our fiscal officer to see if that's a realistic expectation of him. We have a new fiscal officer. He's been there for not quite 2 months. So he's still learning the ropes. And also what the cost was going to be. And I thought an annual audit for an organization our size would be enough. Well, we're still talking to our accountants about getting their opinion on it. And I thought 20,000 was going to be enough. And the burst of laughter I got when I said that told me that that was not going to be anywhere near enough. So we will find those costs, and don't be surprised if we come in next session asking for amounts to cover, assuming that the ADC and the board does agree with that and wants to go in that direction. An amount to cover periodic internal audits, financial audits.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My apologies. Representative Yamashita, I skipped over you, so back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. As far as the audit, your final comments, the line of questions on the you doing an internal audit, things like that. I always thought that long-term, the state needs to kind of look at those kind of practices where all the departments kind of do their own audits, and then the auditor's role would become to audit the audits. But anyway, that's for another time. As far as, I just a quick comment about earlier conversations where we talked about one of my pet peeves, and I mentioned it before, was that the departments don't talk to each other, work with each other enough to use their expertise in different areas. And that goes to your point about the Department of Ag, CTAR, and everybody using their strengths, and even DBED and whoever else. And I've talked to Chair Hashem about this, and every ag chair since that we need to kind of look at that, since Chair Suji, we kind of look at that where everybody kind of works together and uses their expertise. But anyway, my question is, you know, in your mission, acquisition is part of one of your missions. Do you have a plan or thoughts on how acquisition happens or what you plan to do in the future?
That's a good question, Rep. Yamashita. Much of that depends on the appropriation. I mean, for, we're buying land and everything else like that. As far as, I guess partnering with private sectors and everything, we haven't crossed that bridge yet. But that's something that we should be. But acquisition is, again, you need money, right? So for us is that we're not in a position to float bonds or do anything like that. So in the near future, unless the legislature appropriates money, I don't think that in the near future, meaning within 5 years, I don't think we're gonna acquire anything more. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. But so there was no discussion about strategically what kind of land you'll be trying to cluster or pull together, and even, you see, you don't have the means to float bond, but you do have revenue bond authority.
Yeah.
That the legislature could approve.
We're-
But
yeah.
and you could come up with a plan on how to pay down that revenue bond based upon the revenue gain from the land. I know that ag, works on slim margins and high risk and all those things. But I just want to know if you give that much thought.
We're constantly looking for lands that would benefit agriculture. One of the most recent ones we looked in Cuneo, 200 acres, was by Pioneer. We got the appropriation. Unfortunately, we're too late. It's still pending, but I don't think we're gonna close the deal with them because, there's a private sector that came in, but we're constantly looking at lands that could benefit agriculture. And sometimes not necessarily on Oahu only, we looked at Kauai, the Kikiola land, the one the county bought. That would have been a good adjacent property to our Kikau lands and everything else like that. At one point, we took a look at lands on Maui to help, the pineapple company to expand their production because, as I understood it, that they needed more lands to be more profitable. Unfortunately, that fell through, but, and it's like, it's not only us. I mean, there has to be a partner. There has to be a political will to do it. So the people that on Kauai or Maui, they have to come in and say, I want to do this if we can do that. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. But we constantly look at opportunities for agriculture. And so, and we're not at the stage or we're not at the point that we could float a bond. And if we were to do that, we need to hire a lot more staff, somebody that's smarter than I am that can look at how to do a bond and everything like that, financial. And that's always a question of, can you consult other people, financial institutions to do that? That's always a consideration. We're looking, we constantly look at that. We're not there yet, but there's something to consider.
Okay, so in general, your acquisition plan is based on current opportunity and not necessarily a long-term vision of what you plan to buy?
I think it's all of that, but mainly it's funding. I mean, I could have all the vision and we can have all of the opportunities, but if we can't have a means to pay for it, that's pretty difficult.
Okay. Okay. With that being said, and I agree that it's always been my position that it's difficult because of limited resources and so many needs for the whole state for the same pot of money. Have you, I know that Chair Tarnas is working on Act 90 and moving the lands from DLNR to Department of Ag. Have you consulted with DLNR for lands that you'd be interested in?
I have not. I'm kind of watching Act 90 and things like that. And maybe the idea is to have some of the lands come over from DLNR to DOA, maybe to come to ADC and vice versa. But, you know, I mean, we're watching that, what's the process is. We haven't gotten there yet. Okay, so, and it's, I know they're having conversations, you know, with Chair Tarnas and Senator Inouye about the transition. So we're always interested in seeing what's happening and if we could help and you could help, you know, the parties and farming and everything like that.
And Chair, my final, along the same line. So the, you know, getting back to like my earlier point about duplication of, you know, all the departments using their expertise and there's duplication of effort. So Department of Ag has a land division and you do. Do you think either one of you should do it or both of you should continue to do it?
I think we have different charges, you know, because they're more a land manager and I think we're more purchase develop and to, so we have, it's a different role, you know. At some point it gets pretty blur, you know, that we're doing almost the same thing. Again, I mean, I think we have different philosophies and, you know, for the farmers, et cetera, like that. I mean, I don't mean to offend them or anything like that, but.
So did the discussions happen between you as far as that strategically, how you guys split it up or?
No, it hasn't. It should, but it hasn't.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but I think further discussion needs to be had on this issue.
Thank you. I agree.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you. Actually, I like that line of questioning, Chair Yamashita, because it pulls me to the UHERO report that was mentioned yesterday. In that report, it says if land acquisition were to stop for the foreseeable future, ADC might instead focus on enhancing the downstream and ancillary services that are already a focus of its Whitmore Village project, providing conditions such that vital intermediate services such as cold storage and product packaging or assistance with meeting regulatory requirements are available to all farmers in the central Oahu area and beyond would be highly beneficial to reviving agriculture and keeping imports and ag lands in production. So I think that's another example of Representative Yamani's question, Yamashita's question about you could also go the other direction and pause and then focus on all of these other ancillary things. And so this is really a policy question, a direction that is a conversation with ADC and legislators for funding purposes, as well as the larger agriculture community. Would you agree with that kind of
Is that
characterization?
a newsletter that you are, or what are you reading from?
I'm reading from the UHERO report, but it was also very
Oh,
critical.
okay.
But it goes in the other direction. It says, why don't you pause?
Yeah.
Because there's so much acreage
Right.
right now that you're struggling with. Why don't you pause with land acquisition and really do it well with what you have? Is that another direction you could go?
Okay, so I just, okay, just for the record, I think that we're gonna pause and all of our lands, I mean, we don't have that much lands. I think that we're gonna put into production, you know, within the next, I think, year and a half. But as we pointed out that we plan to lease 1,000 acres out. It's not out of the question that what you're talking about is that you're looking at development, you know, like Whitmore Village, and I think we're starting to focus on that. We did do a master plan years ago. I think at the present time, we are revisiting that plan and looking at doing, you know, like value added areas to help, you know, ancillary things to help agriculture. So it's not just land acquisition and everything, farmers like that. So we are on that note and we are proceeding with that. I mean, and we are doing that. And with I think with the value added facility that the UH is putting up, I mean, that really ties, it complements each other because now that, you know, you have to have storage, cold storage, et cetera, for the farmers and everything. And by the way, we did plan something like that, you know, a while back, but it seems like the farmers out in the plains were not ready for that. And so the funding lapsed, but there was an appropriation of 650,000 for cold storage and planning, et cetera, like that. But the timing wasn't there. And, you know, I didn't want to do planning and kind of create a white elephant. So we just we had different priorities. But again, we're starting to revisit the whole thing. And we're in the planning process right now to give you, and I can give you some an update if you want to, of what the process would be, but we're looking at developing that whole area. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm seeing Chair Hashem, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, it's similar to this line of questioning that's going on. In the report, it said you have a 75% vacancy out there, and on your presentation, you said you had a 50% occupancy on your Kekaha lands. Can you explain going to that, and why is it? Can you address the vacancy?
It depends who's saying what, but I can't explain. I can only give you what we have, and if you need further explanation, we can talk about that. But that's what it is. I mean, we have, and maybe it's just a matter of timing and what we put into production, and when they looked at it and when it's now and everything else like that. I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that.
Does that answer your question?
I think we can talk about it.
Okay, so I think this issue of vacancy and what I heard Chair say is that there's inconsistent numbers out there. And so what we need to do is that it's a point in time, right? Vacancy is sometimes a point in time. We have to look at it and ask.
And then, I just gotta know, it might be tillable and untillable. So there might be, lands, like a parcel might be 500 acres and what's tillable might be only 350. So it depends how you calculate it. I mean, that might be an explanation. I'm not sure who's writing the article and how the accuracy of, the article is there. But I can find out if you want more information, But I think our stats are pretty accurate.
Okay. Any more questions from members on the Zoom? Rep. Pruso, go ahead. Last question.
Sure. So I want to say that the legislative purpose language of HRS 163D, the statute that created ADC, that does seem to stand the test of time is that it was intended to, quote, create a vehicle and process to make optimal use of agricultural assets for the economic, environmental, and social benefit of the people of Hawaii. And that wasn't really highlighted in the audit. But I did want to ask, so given this history of legal and environmental problems resulting from agricultural practices on ADC lands, especially on Kauai, but not exclusively on Kauai, practices that have created serious liabilities and legal risks for the state, not to mention public health hazards for our communities. Do you think that it's time for ADC to make the dramatic reduction of the use of chemical pesticides and synthetic fertilizers a priority on our public agricultural lands?
Talking about pesticides?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
So I'm not clear about, we don't regulate pesticides, but I can tell you that what we showed you today is that that's what the trend is to move to. Coverage structures, so you have protective means from disease and insects and everything like that. In the world of agriculture, I mean, pesticides are getting very, very expensive. They're not as effective as before, and the reason for that is that because of the environment, you don't have chemicals that like tomaticides that last a long time in the ground forever. I mean, it's something that anyway. We are cognizant of that, and it's really the Department of Agriculture that regulates pesticides. Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to ask, like, my point, or what I'm thinking about is those license applications. So are you, or have you thought about moving to the point where you are including that information on a license application? The intention to use intensive pesticides or synthetic fertilizers?
I think that's a legal question, and it's like I said, the use of pesticides is regulated by the Department of Agriculture. That could be a consideration, but I'm not sure that that's something that we can address today. that's really a legal question, and the use of pesticides and everything else like that.
Okay. I see Chair Tarnish. Chair Tarnish, do you have another question? Go ahead.
Yes, please. Following up on Chair Hashem, the auditor said he found a 75% vacancy rate on all your lands. You're saying in your presentation, there's a 30% vacancy rate. It's a huge difference, right? So when I heard your presentation, for example, in Kalepa, you say you have a 94% of your lands are occupied, but that's actually not true if you look at the entire acreage that you have in Kalepa. It's only 68%. So it sounds like there's some very basic things that are, we need to have a common way, a common metric so that we can be able to evaluate your success rate. Mokuleia, you say you have 100% occupied, but it's only 18 acres out of your 148 acres, which is only 12%. So if you're only looking at your tillable land as your denominator, we got to have that explained, because the general public is hearing very vastly different numbers in your vacancy rate. So let's get that clear. I think it would be very important for the public to understand that and for the legislature to understand that.
Well, with regards, thank you, Chair Tarnish. So I guess regard to Mokuleia, while there's 148 acres, his license is for 18 acres, and that's it. And the rest of the land is, I'm not sure that it belongs to us, but anyway, okay, we can check the discrepancy. With regards to Kalepa, if you look at what we sent you on the second page, it gives you a clear explanation of the vacant lands or untillable lands, gullies, and stuff like that. If you can look at that, and it gives you an explanation of unusable land. I mean, that I can, I put it down specifically so there's no confusion over there. But if you turn to that page in the presentation, it gives you a clear picture of, the tillable, untillable lands.
Yeah, and I can understand why you may use only tillable land as your denominator when you look at your percent that's occupied or vacant. But I think we just need to be consistent and use the same metric so that we're, comparing apples and apples and not mixing it up.
Okay,
I know we're running short on time, so I'll turn it back to you now, Chair Belatti.
Thank you. Members, we will have ADC return back because I think there are more questions. I have more questions on records management. We're going to be taking a look at the documentation for the HIC pros system that you folks have posted. So we will come back with it. I do want to kind of close up on one outstanding matter, and I hope this can be done quickly because I just want to make sure we have clarity around this document. And I believe this is something that I'm going to ask Mr. Nakamoto, Ken about. So we have talked about this enforcement timeline that was provided to the committee. And I wanted to just understand, is this your work product, this enforcement timeline that lists measures taken by ADC from December 31st, 2012 to January 16, 2020 with regard to the Galbraith lands? The Whitmore property enforcement?
Yes, that's product of our office, yes.
Okay, and it seems that set of information around the criminal activities on ADC lands, that from the auditor's report, it largely was taken from interviews with you. When you look at page 43 of the audit, you're cited to as the project manager. And it appears that it was from that kind of colloquy of questions that they made this conclusion that ADC, had not really done anything before the 2020, February 2020. Is that correct?
Not sure what you're referring to, but yeah,
okay.
This was
another way to ask. So you were interviewed by audit staff about the criminal activities on ADC lands, correct?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't recall receiving any questions regarding criminal activity in Whitmore. I don't remember.
Okay. But you would have spoken with someone about being aware of illegal cockfights, prostitution, abandoned vehicles, squatters, fights, thefts, and dumping of trash.
I remember mentioning that to the neighborhood board, and maybe they that was said through other things, but I don't recall saying those. I mean, I did say that before, but I don't recall saying that specifically to the auditors.
There are very specific quotes in this audit.
Okay.
And so I'm assuming that it's you.
Right.
Do you recall talking with anyone from the auditor's office or being asked about the enforcement measures taken around Whitmore property?
No, I don't recall.
Okay.
Maybe they mentioned something about what's going on in Whitmore, but I don't specifically recall them asking me about what was my efforts to curb criminal activity in Whitmore.
Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
The audit, it says project manager told KHON News about multiple.
No, but at page 43, it says the project manager told us. Not only was he aware of illegal cockfights, prostitution, abandoned vehicles, squatters, fights, theft, and dumping of trash, that those problems had been going on for years. Do you recall telling that to someone from the auditor's office?
I don't, but if it's quoted, then I must have, but I don't recall off the
Okay.
top of my head saying
Do
that.
you remember being recorded during your interviews?
Yes.
Previously, we had asked and offered, just like we had done with the DLNR representatives, for you as someone who was interviewed to sign notice and consent of confidentiality of these taped interviews. I'd like to ask now of you, are you interested? Because it's difficult to understand. Okay. Okay, can I please see that? Okay, so I just want to confirm, Mr. Nakamoto, you have signed a waiver of confidentiality for copies of the audio recordings and any transcripts thereof made in connection with the audit resulting in audit report number 21-01. And this waiver of confidentiality is signed September 21st, 2021. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have on this matter and just kind of closing the loop on that. Chair Ashton, did you have any further comments or questions? Yesterday, in speaking with the auditor, I pointed out to the initial 7 tenant files that ADC had generated for the auditor's review. Would you be willing to provide me with the names of those 7 initial tenant files that were created for the auditors in their review? Yeah. So at page 18 of the auditor's report, the auditor states, the report states, when we requested tenant files for 7 of ADC's 83 tenants, which we randomly selected for review, staff informed us the corporation did not maintain the tenant files, but at some point you folks, you were able to provide the files for them to review on those initial 7 tenants.
So let me put it this way. If we can identify what those 7 tenant records are, I mean, as you can tell, our collective memories. But as we read things come back to us. So if I can find hopefully a transmittal or even an email. But here's the thing, since we can, of course, we can provide that, certainly. But here's the thing that I think we all have to be aware of, that as we went through this process, and it became very apparent to us that we needed to improve, we started to improve. So what I provide you today as a file may not be, in all fairness to the auditor, what we provided him.
Okay, that's
right?
fair.
Because,
That is-
okay, all
That's
right.
very fair. And then,
Okay.
I mean, that then is actually evidence of progress made
Okay.
or not made. So please provide us, if you can, reconstruct it. Because the auditor has said he will not share with us who those initial 7 tenant files are. So if you could, if you can determine from your transmittals
Okay.
who
thank you.
those 7 tenant files are, that would be helpful for us to understand what has been the follow-up as well. Okay. And then this is just some documents questions. Again, in the audit, there was mention of a matrix of projects. Was that matrix turned over as part of ADC's production of documents? The project matrix? That was cited too. In the audit. At page 21. So it's a project matrix. And I understand it might have been a matrix that's now expanded, but that a version of that was submitted pursuant to the subpoenas. And you can go back and check. You can go back and check on that question. As well as the audit mentions ADC's 10-step acquisition process. Was that turned over to the committee in ADC's production of documents?
Okay, that I kind of remember because that's what I do here. So I don't remember a 10-step. I remember that we had nothing. But when they started asking me about that, I just created something. And so so my point was land is unique. And what we would operate under was something that I got when I did these acquisitions as a Deputy Attorney General. But I don't follow them point by point by point. I look at the property, and if an item is applicable, then I will pursue that in my due diligence. If it's not, I just move on. And I guess that's what all attorneys do. I don't know what the 10 point is, but when I ultimately ended up giving them this document, which was created after the end of fiscal year 2019, I think that's always important for us to remember. The date that we are creating documents or turning over documents and the effective date of that document as it relates to the effective period of the audit. It was not 10 points. It was like 5 pages.
Okay.
Because I was comprehensive. I wanted something that was going to last from now for the next 20 years for whoever took my place. That was the point of that exercise.
Okay, no, so I would be very interested in seeing it. If that document has not been already included and provided to the committee, I think we would be interested in that, what that process is. Okay, so thank you very much. Again, members, thank you for your indulgence. It's now 12:03. We are going to be returning to wrap up questioning with Auditor Kondo at 2:00 p.m. And then we will be taking up testimony from Chair Shimabukuro Geyser on Thursday at 11:00 a.m. I want to thank members for your hard work and due diligence. I want to thank ADC for attending and providing testimony. Please also make sure that we have the copy of the PowerPoint provided so that we can make that also available publicly. And we will continue to stay in touch as we do our document reviews, and then as we identify other potential witnesses who we might want to speak with and bring before, or have you come back before us to answer any other follow-up questions, likely in October. All right. So members, seeing no further discussion at this time, this hearing is adjourned.